All right, let's jump into another deep dive. I think we've all been wondering, how is Russia's economy actually holding up under all this pressure? Sanctions and, this long war in Ukraine, it's got to be taking a toll, right? We've got reports from experts and some data, even a little peek into how everyday Russians are feeling this. Should be interesting.
Yeah, yeah. The interesting thing is it's not like a simple answer, boom or bust.
Right.
Like there are some signs that things are slowing down, but then there's these kind of surprising areas where it's actually growing.
Where'd you
It's a
go?
bit of a puzzle, yeah.
Okay, well, let's start with the slowdown then. Like, what are we seeing? What do the numbers say?
Well, even Russia's own economic forecasts, they've been revised, downwards,
Oh,
which is never really a good sign.
yeah.
And then if you look at certain sectors, there are some, honestly, pretty alarming trends. Like, take Russian railways. I mean, think about it. That's the nation's biggest employer, and their freight volume, it's dropped almost 9% since last year. Yeah, and they're even having to raise prices and cut back on investments just to kind of stay afloat.
It's like a domino effect almost.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we've got this slowdown, but then there's this whole other side of it, right? All this spending because of the war. It's kind of like these two forces, going head to head. What's the deal with that?
Totally. The sanctions from Western countries are definitely hitting them, but at the same time, Russia's pouring tons of money into the war effort. And at least for the time being, that's keeping some parts of the economy going.
Okay, so then the question is, how long can they actually keep that up? I mean, is this sustainable? Is this like a ticking time bomb?
Yeah, that's the million ruble question.
Yeah.
And it kind of leads us right into this other big concern, stagflation. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of jargony, like Econ 101 or something.
Right.
But I think it's really important to, break it down, understand it, because it really does affect things in the real world.
Oh, absolutely. Think of it this way. An economy that's stuck, right? Prices are going up, but there's no real growth. It's like running on a treadmill, putting in all that effort, but not really getting anywhere.
Right.
And some economists, they're really starting to worry that Russia's showing all the signs of heading right into stagflation.
What kind of signs are we talking about?
So along with those rising prices, businesses are having a really tough time.
Yeah.
They can't get loans, they can't make payments, the whole economy's shrinking.
Makes sense.
There's this feeling like, what's next? Uncertainty. And those are all the warning signs for stagflation, for sure.
So it's like pressure from sanctions, the war spending that might not even be possible to keep up, and now stagflation is on the horizon.
Yeah.
Sounds like things could be getting kind of tense, behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. All this economic strain is causing some serious friction, especially at the top. Like with the central bank, and the head of this central bank, Elvira Nabiullina.
Oh, yeah, she's been like a real figure to watch.
For sure.
She's known for being like tough and independent, especially about economic policy. I mean, she's been given like a really unusual amount of power in the past, hasn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. But now, her way of doing things, especially this tight monetary policy, which is basically keeping interest rates high, it's starting to get some pushback.
Oh, really? From who?
Well, you've got these powerful industrialists, big players in the economy, and even some people within the government itself, they're not happy.
Wow.
They're saying that Nabiullina's focus on controlling inflation is actually what's hurting economic growth.
So you've got these two totally different ideas of what to do.
Yeah.
It's not just about numbers at this point. It's about like what direction they want Russia's economy to go in.
Yeah, for sure. This is like a power struggle, and whoever wins, it's going to have a huge impact, not just in Russia, but like on the whole world stage.
Okay, so we've got this big picture view, but I want to know, how is this affecting like the everyday person in Russia? How are they feeling all this?
Okay, so this is where it gets really surprising. With all these challenges we've been talking about, real wages in Russia, they've actually gone up a lot since the war started.
Wait, really?
Yeah, close to 18%.
I mean, with everything going on, you'd think it would be the opposite.
I know, right? It's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect, but there are some possible explanations for it.
Okay, well, walk me through them. Like, what's going on? Why are wages increasing like that?
One thing is the government's definitely stepping in.
Okay.
They're trying to boost incomes, especially for certain types of jobs.
Right, but how long can they keep doing that, though? I mean, they can't just keep throwing money at it forever, can they?
That's a good question. And it raises a bigger point, like, is this wage increase just covering up bigger problems, problems that are just brewing under the surface?
So it's almost like it seems good now, but it could be a problem later.
Yeah, exactly. Like putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm, right? It might make you feel a little better for a bit, but it doesn't actually fix the problem.
Right, right. Okay, so where does this leave us with the Russian economy in the long run? Is this a sign that they're actually doing okay, or is this all going to come crashing down?
That's what we're going to dive into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at whether Russia can keep defying expectations or if all this pressure is going to finally catch up to them.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, it's like, is this real, or is it, I don't know, some kind of trick?
That's a good question. You always have to remember, like, economics, it's never that simple.
Right.
It's not just black and white. There's always a bunch of stuff happening at the same time. And with Russia, it's especially messy.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So besides all this government spending, what else is like shaping how Russia's economy is doing right now?
Well, one thing that really stands out is that Russia isn't in a debt crisis.
Okay.
Not yet, at least.
Okay.
They actually went into all this, the conflict and everything, with pretty low debt.
Well,
So that gives them a bit of wiggle room.
yeah, that makes sense. They can, like, do more because they don't owe as much, right?
Exactly. It's like having more options, more freedom to move around, especially compared to countries that are already drowning in debt.
Right.
And then on top of that, consumer spending inside Russia is actually going up, which
No.
seems kind of crazy when you think about the sanctions and the war, right?
Yeah.
But there's a certain group of people who are actually doing better because of all this.
Interesting. So we've got low debt, people are spending more, and wages are going up. Doesn't really sound like an economy that's falling apart.
No, not really. And that's why we have to look deeper, Go beyond just the headlines and try to figure out what's really going on. Because, yeah, there are some signs that Russia's economy is holding up, but there's also some serious worries about what all this means for the long term.
Yeah. The source we're looking at, they mentioned that Russia seems to be more focused on like short-term gains than long-term investments. What's
Yeah.
that about?
Right. So the worry is that Russia is basically putting its future at risk to pay for what's happening now. All that money going to the war, it's taking away from important stuff like infrastructure and education and new technology,
Yeah.
the kind of things that help a country grow in the long run,
Oh, you're right, yeah.
If you don't invest in that stuff, Russia could fall behind.
So it's kind of like back to that tension between the central bank and those industrialists we were talking about. Nabulina, with her focus on inflation and being careful, she's thinking about the long term.
Right. Exactly. She's like the voice of caution,
Yeah.
warning everyone about spending too much and saying they need to be more disciplined.
And the industrialists, they're feeling the pressure from the sanctions and the slowdown. So they just want things to get better now, even if it means taking risks.
Yeah. They want lower interest rates, easier loans, basically just anything to boost the economy in the short term.
So it's like, do you want something good now or something better later?
Yeah. Short-term gain versus long-term sustainability, classic dilemma. And whatever Russia decides to do is going to be a really big deal for its economy in the future.
A gamble.
Definitely a gamble.
Yeah.
And nobody knows how it's going to turn out.
Man, this is a lot.
Yeah.
It feels like we've gone way deeper than like what you usually see in the news.
I think that's what we try to do with these deep dives, right? Get past the surface and really understand the whole picture.
And it's definitely clear that there's no easy answers when it comes to Russia's economy. I mean, it's constantly changing.
Oh, absolutely. Like, just when you think you've got a handle on things, something totally unexpected happens.
Yeah, like that wage increase.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that you got to keep asking questions and looking deeper to really understand what's going on.
For sure.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to hear from you. What are you thinking so far?
Yeah, we always love hearing your thoughts.
But before we move on, I've got one last think piece for you to ponder. Okay, so we've talked about all this tension, the focus on the short term, the question of whether it can even last.
Right.
What kind of legacy is this war going to leave on Russia's economy? I mean, is this just a temporary thing, like a bump in the road?
Right.
Or is this something bigger, something that's going to permanently change its course?
These are the questions that are going to define Russia's economic future. And they're the ones we'll keep exploring in our next segment. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Our deep dive isn't over yet. It's wild, right? We've kind of gone through all these layers of Russia's economy and what. It's strong in some ways, but also kind of shaky,
Totally. they're using their low debt and all those resources they have to handle the sanctions, but, they might be paying a big price later for putting all their energy into this war, right?
And that's what it comes down to. Can they actually keep this up? Is there a point where it all falls apart?
Yeah, I mean, the source doesn't exactly give us a clear answer,
Yeah.
but it does have some really interesting thoughts from experts who are watching all of this really closely.
Yeah. One expert said something that really stuck with me. They compared what Russia is doing now to, like, stuffing yourself while the party lasts.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
What do you think about that?
It makes you think, right? Like, they're going all out now, maybe even if it hurts them later.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, can they afford to keep partying, or is the music going to stop?
Right, and what happens then?
Yeah. What kind of mess are they going to have to deal with?
Exactly. So, will this, economic stress change things permanently, or will they bounce back after the war ends and the sanctions are gone?
I guess it depends on what they decide to do,
Yeah.
about their whole economy. But are they going to keep going it alone, or try to, get back into the global economy?
Those are some big decisions for sure. It's going to affect everything, not just their economy, but also, their place in the world.
And everyone's watching to see what happens.
Oh, yeah. The stakes are high, not just for Russia, but for everyone.
Right, because they're such a big part of, energy and stuff. Anything they do affects the whole world.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap this up, I think the main thing I'm taking away is just how complicated all this is.
Yeah.
It's not simple. There's no easy answer.
Yeah, it's a story that's still being written.
And I think it shows how important it is to, not just look at the headlines.
Right.
Got to look deeper, consider different sides, and, be okay with not knowing everything, for sure.
Totally. The more we learn about, how the global economy works, the better we'll be at making good decisions and talking about all these challenges.
Yeah, and the opportunities too, right?
Right.
So to everyone listening, keep learning, keep asking questions. The world's changing all the time, and knowledge is, the most powerful thing you can have.
Couldn't agree more.
And as always, we want to know what you think. Tell us about your take on this deep dive.
Yeah, share your thoughts.
Thanks for joining us on this, journey into Russia's economy. It's been real. Until next time, stay curious,